The final chapter, 9. It's January 1869. I got my summons from Otori right after the Matsumai domain fell. The Matsumai domain had until then governed the island of Ezo. If Hijikata and the rest of the loyalist forces were to operate in Ezo, then Matsumai was, by necessity, their first target. I crossed to the island just as Otori had instructed, booking passage on a Russian merchant ship. I arrived to find the land of Ezo covered in snow. Hello there, Yukimura. When I arrived at Hakuoki, it was Otori who came to pick me up. Thank you so much for arranging all of this. I gave him a short bow. And congratulations on establishing the Republic of Ezo. The Republic was established by former vassals of Tokugawa. It was intended to be a refuge for the remnants of the Tokugawa clan and a stronghold of samurai tradition, not an independent state. After conquering Matsumai, they'd wasted no time in establishing the country that had been proposed back in Sendai. Well, calling it a republic is a bit of an exaggeration, said Otori. He smiled. As soon as the elections were finished, I sent for you. Elections? As quickly and simply as he could, Otori explained the concept of an election and how it gave everyone a voice in the government. Then everyone has a say about who's in power. I'd never heard of such a thing before, but it seemed like a good idea. Inomoto is our president at the moment. He's the only one who can call the whole government together, said Otori. Otori had taken the post of Minister of the Army, and Hijikata was Vice Minister of the same. You had to wait for 3 months, I understand. Were they long? Yes. I nodded. Still, the fact that they'd already defeated the Matsumai domain and established their own government spoke well for the excellence of the one-time shogun's former military. 3 months had been a long time for me, but to the world of war and politics, it was scarcely the blink of an eye. Otori and I chatted as we walked, but when the subject of Hijikata came up, his expression clouded. Ever since we came to Ezo, Hijikata's been different. Different? How? He's nicer to his men, which is good, but he spends too much time locked away in his room. He says he spends most of his time there deep in thought, and he won't let anyone come by. I wasn't quite sure what to say. Otori seemed to sense it, and instead of continuing the conversation, reached into his jacket to remove an envelope. I think he needs you. Me? My heart skipped a beat. This document officially appoints you to your position. You can get the details after you give it to Hijikata. Thank you. I took the letter from him and bowed. The year was coming to an end. I changed into the Western clothes I'd brought. It was going to take time to get used to them, and headed for Goryokaku. Goryokaku is a star-shaped fortress built in Hakuoki. It made use of European-style fortifications and served as the chief fortress for the Republic of Ezo. The main hall was full of people, all of them there to celebrate the establishment of their new government. But Hijikata wasn't among them. He was in his room, alone. I took a deep breath, then rapped my hand against the door several times in quick succession. Otori had called it knocking and told me that it was customary to do it when opening a Western-style door to signal to whoever was inside. After a few seconds of silence, a tired voice drifted out. "I'm not attending. This isn't the time for a party." I knew that voice very well. I put my hand on the doorknob and turned. "Excuse me?" He turned toward the door, preparing a half-hearted tirade for whoever had intruded on his solitude. When he saw me, the words froze in his throat. "Chizuru Yukimura, reporting as ordered. I have been assigned to serve as Vice Minister Hijikata's page by Minister Otori." His mouth worked soundlessly for a moment, finally closing with a snap. He stared at me intently for several more seconds, then frowned. "It's a mistake. I haven't been told about this." I handed him the letter Otori had given me. "I was given these orders from Minister Otori earlier." He snatched the envelope from me with a scowl and tore it open. His eyes scanned the page rapidly, his frown deepening with each line. When he finished, he shot me a sharp look and thrust the letter and its envelope back into my hands. "No, take it back. I can't approve of this posting." And here we have a decision coming up. Do I take back the letter or not? What will give us the best possible outcome? Chizuru takes the envelope because she knows Hijikata well. I understand. I nodded and took the letter from his outstretched hand. Then I tore it to pieces. "What are you doing?" He looked shocked. "I don't care if you won't approve these orders. I shouldn't have relied on them in the first place. I tried to force Hijikata to let me stay with Otori's orders. Now I saw how wrong that had been. I hadn't come to Ezo because I was ordered to. I'd accepted Otori's help and come to Ezo because I wanted to be with Hijikata. That was all that mattered. I came here because I wanted to. I want you to let me stay here with you. I couldn't let orders be the reason. He had to make that choice." Hijikata frowned and looked away. "Not fair for me to be the only guy with the luxury of a girl for a page, especially when I'm sending men off to die." Is that why you left me?" He fell silent and shifted, uncomfortable. Then that was why. "Stop this." Before I realized it, I was yelling. Hijikata looked equally surprised. "You always do this. You decide you can't do something and then you make up all the excuses you need to justify it. You say you're doing it for my feelings, but you don't even know what they are." When he'd left me behind, Hijikata had said that he couldn't make me happy and that I should go live my life. But he was what made me happy, and I wanted to live my life with him. Now he was trying to push me away again so that he could bear his burden alone. I couldn't let him do that. "You take on so much and you won't let anyone else help." "That's my job." There was an edge of anger to his voice. "If I can handle it, then it's my responsibility to." I screamed back at him at the top of my lungs. "What about the people who have to watch you do this?" I'd watched him torture himself this way for too long. Every hardship, every burden was his and his alone to suffer in solitude. And I hadn't been the only one. Inoue, Yamazaki, Kondo, they'd all had to watch, and so had plenty of other people who cared about him. I can't let you do this to yourself. I want to be here for you. I want to help you. What else am I supposed to do? Hijikata suddenly became blurry, and I realized that there were tears filling my eyes. He fell silent. Then, after several moments of silence, he sighed and slumped. I give up. I blinked. Can't fight an Edo woman. Better to just listen to him, I guess. And I hope you saw the blossoms falling there. His voice was gentle, and he looked up with a wry smile. Then suddenly his arms were around me. I let myself sink into his chest, speechless. He held me tight, as if now that he finally had me, he didn't ever want to let go. Ever since you left. He stopped, and I could sense him trying to organize his feelings. I got the impression he was confused. I figured some things out. His arms tightened. Whatever distance had separated us in the past was long gone now. You supported me. Guess that's the best way to put it. He sounded slightly bewildered, as if even he couldn't believe what he was saying. He wasn't the only one. When you're not here, it's hard for me to deal with it, all of it. Life, I guess. My heart swelled with each word he spoke. You saved me. I could feel the warmth of his body touching every part of mine. I couldn't stop crying. Chizuru, do you think the Shinsengumi still stands for what it means to be a true samurai? Have I done what I was supposed to? Have I led us down the right path? The soul of the Shinsengumi that our friends believed in is alive in you. Then, after a moment of thought, I continued. In fact, I think it's even stronger now. We've been through a lot, but it's brought all of us together. Hearing you say that makes me happy. His voice was warm. The men the Shinsengumi has left are true samurai. No more need for the iron fist. Yes. Everyone in the Shinsengumi had the same goal in sight now. With that unity of vision came a clarity of purpose, and I hope that without the necessity for discipline and management, Hijikata's burden might ease a little. Well, from now on, please don't try and hide your problems from me. I'm here to help you. You don't have to do this alone anymore. He was silent then, but his arms stayed wrapped around me. Then at last he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Stay with me. As Vice Minister Hijikata's page, I spent every day assisting him in his duties. Since coming to Ezo, he'd seemed much more at ease during the daylight hours. Perhaps there was something about the northern climate that was affecting his fury blood. My job saw me spending more time around Hijikata than I ever had before, and he began treating me quite nicely. I felt a little bad that I was getting spoiled, but whenever I was around him, my heart soared and my breath came a little faster. Then one day, just after the beginning of the new year, Otori came to visit Hijikata. Please, have some tea. Oh, thank you, said Otori. He gave me a warm smile as I handed him his tea. Your assistant here is quite something. Tell me, where did you find her? Well, I think some samurai wannabe had her sent over here without my permission. You know anything about that? He glared at Otome, who only laughed. Oh, I was only doing it for your sake, you know, although I'm a bit jealous now. A cute, dedicated, efficient page. What man could ask for anything more? No, My cheeks felt like they were burning up. I tried to busy myself with the tea and avoided meeting anyone's eyes. Hijikata glanced at me for a moment, then back at Otome, his face calm and serene. I agree. So long as she sticks with me, I don't think I'll need anybody else. I nearly dropped the tea. Otome also looked rather surprised, but quickly raised his cup to his lips in an attempt to hide it. I felt as if I should say something, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Hijikata, of course, remained entirely unruffled and sipped at his tea as if he'd done nothing more exciting than comment on the weather, while Otome and I recovered. Otome finished a very, very long sip, coughed awkwardly, and spoke. I didn't think I'd hear something like that from you, Hijikata. I'd want a wife like her, too. Hijikata laughed. Well, she's mine. You'll have to find one of your own, because there's no way I'm letting her go. Otome laughed. I think Otome was actually a bit sweet on Chizuru. My face was growing hotter by the moment. By now my ears were probably the same shade of brilliant scarlet as my cheeks. Otome looked at Hijikata and me and laughed again. Well, with Hijikata in this sort of mood, I suppose I shouldn't stay too long, huh? With one last grin at me, he turned to Hijikata. When he spoke, his voice was grim. Do you think they'll be coming? They? Who were they talking about? Hijikata showed no sign of being surprised, but I saw the good cheer of a moment before fade from his face as well. Yeah, soon as the snow melts. Otome nodded. Well, if you think so too, I'm convinced. I've been thinking the same thing myself, said Otome. Inomoto wants to try and work things out diplomatically, but I don't think we'll get out of this without at least some fighting. Yeah, there'll be a fight, that's for sure. No way the Imperial Army's gonna just forget about us. Oh, at last I understood. Inomoto can hope for peace if that's what he wants to do, but the army should be ready to move as soon as spring is here. Of course, said Otome. Don't worry about Inomoto and his cabinet. I'll deal with them. Hijikata nodded. Gotta admit, before we came here I never thought you and me would ever see eye to eye. Yes, well, we did get off to a bit of a rocky start. Neither of us was born a samurai, but we went about becoming that in different ways. They shared a short grin. The family you were born to isn't important, said Otome. It's what you make of yourself that matters. Otome and Hijikata were two very different people, but listening to his passion as he talked, there was no doubt that he was similarly admired by his men. His words resonated with me especially. I was born into a family of demons, but here I was. We chose to fight for what we believed in, said Otome. That path led us here. That's all there is to it. Hijikata smiled and nodded. Our ambition will never waver. We'll fight till the end and give it all we've got. Otome smiled back, relieved. Thanks for your time. He bowed to both of us, stood up, and let himself out. There's going to be a battle? I set about clearing the teacups. "Come here, Chizuru." He turned and stepped out of the room without even waiting for my response. "Huh? I set the teacups down again and trotted after him. Outside, the wind was frigid. Without thick clothing, it cut straight through to the bone. We looked out over Ezo, blanked in snow. "See those mountains?" "Yeah." Some miles distant, a row of snow-covered peaks thrust their way up into the slate-grey sky like jagged teeth. "They'll attack Hakuoki through those mountains." "Why not from the ocean?" "They'd have to come by ship. There was no other way to Ezo. That meant they'd have to land somewhere to unload troops, so I'd assumed they'd try and take the port first." Hijikata seemed to think otherwise. "No, they're smarter than that. We've got the advantage if they just try to take the port. If the Imperial Army comes to Ezo, they'll probably land in Otome, maybe Isashi." I nodded. From what I remembered of the maps of Ezo, I'd seen Otome and Isashi lay on the opposite side of the mountains. "Once their men are over the mountains, they'll have their navy open fire on Hakuoki, attack us on 2 fronts." We were at a disadvantage then. "Isn't there anything we can do?" "Not if they attack from the ocean. If it turns into a naval battle, we're screwed. The battle here at Goryokaku will be my last. This is the last place I'll ever draw my sword as a samurai." Hijikata. Did that mean he believed he would die? I was desperate to talk about something else, anything else, and so I said the first thing that came into my head. "If they don't come, then what will you do?" There was no doubt that they would come, but I couldn't help but dream that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't. Hijikata didn't even seem to consider how ridiculous of a question it was. He only shrugged and replied matter-of-factly. "If they don't come for us, this whole thing ends. Won't be any need for something like the Shinsengumi anymore." A new era where samurai weren't needed, where men were no longer compelled to draw swords against one another. Could such a future ever come to pass? I felt my heart swell with a desperate hope that it might.